acts like if international law does not exist, or simply it does not apply to them. Israel is sowing chaos throughout the region, throughout the Middle East. Its conduct is unworthy of a member of the United Nations. We are witnessing repeated acts of aggression, the bombing of the Lebanese capital, the occupation of new territories in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, and repeated violation of Syrian sovereignty, including abduction of civilians, as occurred just yesterday. In Gaza, Israel is using starvation as a method of warfare, in clear violation of international humanitarian law. A genocide is unfolding before our eyes, before your eyes. This is the behavior of a rogue state, and yet some still wonder why the Middle East remains so dangerously unstable. Madam President, the international community cannot allow a precedent to take hold whereby Israel acts as a judge and a jury, launching unilateral attacks in violation of established legal norms. Such course of action would erode the credibility of the Security Council and diminish the authority of the United Nations Charter itself. We must reaffirm clearly and collectively that the principles enshrined in the Charter are not optional. They are binding obligations. The prohibition of the use of force and the respect of sovereignty of member states are the pillars upon which our international system is built. We further reiterate that right must prevail over might. No political objective, no matter of strategic, can justify actions that defy the legal order upon which peace among nations depends. Let us be clear. Upholding international law is not a choice. It is a duty under all circumstances and without exception. Without exception. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President, for convening this important and urgent meeting. I also thank Director General Grossi and the USG DiCarlo for their significant briefings regarding Israel's ongoing attacks and their impact. The Republic of Korea is gravely concerned about the escalating and deepening conflict in the Middle East. We condemn all actions that plunge the region into an extremely dangerous situation. We are deeply alarmed by Israel's announcement that its targeted operation will continue for as many days as it takes to eliminate the Iranian threat. Although it appears that the strikes were directed at military sites and personnel, including nuclear facilities and missile factories, it is highly troubling that reports indicate they have already resulted in many civilian casualties. As Director General Grossi pointed out, attacks on nuclear facilities could also result in radioactive releases with potential grave consequences on the lives and safety of the people across the region. We support the IAEA's commitment to ensuring nuclear safety, security, and its safeguards mandate in all circumstances. Iran's retaliation risks further escalation in a region already scarred by years of violence and destruction. The Council has consistently warned against the spillover effects of such conflicts. A full-scale war would serve no one in the world. We therefore urge both parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from any actions that could lead to further escalation. Another cycle of violence and retaliation must be avoided. We believe both countries possess the wisdom to avert a broader conflict that the region can hardly afford, and that a narrow but vital window for diplomacy still remains to pull back from the brink of all-out conflagration. Madam President, as a country neighboring another that is seriously violating non-proliferation obligations, the Republic of Korea shares serious concerns over Iran's continued expansion of its nuclear program, including the accelerated production of highly enriched uranium. In light of the expiration of UN Resolution 2231 this October, we have consistently urged Iran to fully cooperate with the IAEA in its monitoring and verification activities under the NPT Safeguards Agreement. However, yesterday, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted a resolution declaring Iran's non-compliance with its non-proliferation obligations for the first time in 20 years. Under this backdrop, the current crisis underscores the urgent need to reach a robust agreement that ensures the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. Without such a resolution, a vicious cycle of armed attack and retaliation may persist, driving the region into even deeper turmoil and instability. We once again call for immediate de-escalation and a renewed push toward a diplomatic solution. The Republic of Korea firmly opposes any steps that further inflame tensions in the region. Pursuing a military solution may produce short-term visible effect, but in the mid to long term, they will only further deepen and entrench the instability and insecurity in the Middle East. We urge all parties to exercise the utmost restraint and urgently return to diplomacy. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, allow me to express my gratitude for swiftly convening this important meeting today. Also, So would like to thank USG DiCarlo and Director Gross for their comprehensive briefing on the grave developments unfolding in the Middle East. Madam President, Somalia is gravely concerned by the escalating confrontation between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel, especially in the light of recent reports regarding Israeli airstrikes on Iran and Iran's subsequent actions. These developments represent a dangerous turning point with serious implications not only for the two countries involved, but for the entire region and the world. We are gravely concerned by the airstrikes against Iran and call for full respect of its sovereignty, territorial integrity in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. The use of force against a sovereign nation, regardless of the justification, risks undermining the foundational principles of international law and further destabilizing global peace and security. While we recognize the right to self-defense enshrined in Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, we call for restraint and de-escalation of the situation. The spillover effects are no longer hypothetical, and the consequences are already painfully clear, threatening to deepen existing crises and endanger countless lives in the Middle East. Madam President, at this critical juncture, my delegation calls for diplomacy, restraint, and meaningful dialogue to resolve the conflict. We urge both parties to refrain from further escalation and to prioritize peaceful engagement, wisdom, and stewardship. The international community must work collectively to de-escalate tensions and facilitate conditions for a durable peace. The Security Council has a clear mandate to uphold international peace and security. We call on all members to act with unity and resolve to support an immediate cessation of hostilities and return to dialogue and diplomacy. Lasting peace in the Middle East can only be achieved through addressing the root causes of instability in the region and the respect for international law. In conclusion, Madam President, Somalia reaffirmed its solidarity with all those affected by this conflict and stands with the global community in urging a return to diplomacy and full adherence to international law and its covenant, including the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Panama.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like to express our thanks to Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and to Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Rafael Grossi, for their presentations, and we welcome the delegations of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Israel, Iraq, and Kuwait. We're meeting here today at a moment of extreme gravity for international peace and security. The Colombian writer, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, had as the title of one of his works a classical expression, wonderful expression, when he qualified a predictable situation as the chronicle of a death pre-announced. And that could be applied to this situation. The events that occurred last night really are hardly surprising, but they do represent a new and troubling link in a chain of tension that threatens regional and global stability. It is especially alarming that these events are taking place in a region marked by deep sensitivities with regard to security and proliferation. The proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons, represents an existential threat that this Council cannot ignore. The Republic of Panama, as a country firmly committed to international law and to global stability, has consistently called for the strengthening of the global non-proliferation regime, and we underscore the irreplaceable role that is played by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, in this collective effort. And we also reaffirm that the full respect for and the integrity and safety of IAEA personnel is an obligation under international law and an indispensable requirement to preserve the credibility of the multilateral verification system. Our position is based on the fundamental principles of our foreign policy: respect for and strengthening of the multilateral system, the non-proliferation regime, and the promotion of diplomatic dialogue as an essential tool to ease tensions and reduce strategic risks. We take note of the report of the IAEA Director General, reference number GOV/2025/24, recently circulated to the members of this Council, where it's indicated that the agency's verification and monitoring related to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, have been severely affected by Iran's cessation of its compliance with commitments, nuclear commitments. Furthermore, we are closely following the discussions of the IAEA Board of Governors, in which a resolution was adopted yesterday, the 12th of June, in Vienna, a resolution stating that the Islamic Republic of Iran is in breach of its obligations under its safeguards agreement with the agency. Unfortunately, the information available to now with regard to the facts and motivations does not still allow us to know the practical scope of this non-compliance and the derived effects from this, and also does not allow us to distill conclusions from this information. Therefore, for the moment, in any event, neither the parties nor the United Nations should allow these events to drag the region into a broader conflict which would contravene the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. We must act with the utmost urgency and responsibility to prevent this. Panama urgently calls for maximum restraint from all states, respect for international law and for the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, and for refraining from any action that could escalate tensions. We urgently appeal for the revitalization of diplomatic channels as a path to reduce tensions and mitigate risks that could have irreparable consequences for international security. We also would recall that international law requires the protection of civilian infrastructure, with special emphasis on nuclear facilities intended for peaceful purposes. Civilian assets that must be protected from attacks and reprisals due to their very nature and because of the potential risks that they pose to the environment and civilian populations. There is no military shortcut to stability. Only genuine, inclusive, and sustained dialogue can offer a lasting way out of the crises that bring us here today. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank you for convening this emergency meeting of the Security Council. At the outset, Sierra Leone unequivocally deplores the unlawful use of force in contravention of the Charter of the United Nations. We deeply regret the seeming reversion to a period when a state can unilaterally resort to the use of force against another state in clear breach of the Charter and international law without consequence. For small states, this is deeply troubling, a deeply troubling trend which poses grave risk to international peace and security and must be firmly rejected. Turning to our agenda, I thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Rafael Grossi for their important briefing. We express grave alarm over the recent report of military strikes by the State of Israel against the territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including strikes on or near sensitive nuclear facilities, including the main Natanz nuclear facility. We are deeply troubled by the loss of life, as according to report, the strikes killed senior Iranian officials, nuclear scientists, and civilians. This development represents a dangerous escalation at a time when the Middle East is already facing multiple and overlapping crises. The region, in our view, is at a precipice, and this moment calls for restraint, responsibility, and diplomacy. We note with deep concern the letter dated 13 June 2025 from the Permanent Representative of Iran, issued as document S/2025/379, which brings to the attention of the Council very serious report of violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran. Any such use of force, especially across international borders, raises significant concerns under international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. We are further troubled by the potential implications of military operations affecting nuclear facilities. As Director General Grossi of IAEA has previously cautioned, any military action targeting or threatening nuclear facilities poses severe risk to human lives, the environment, and regional security. Attacks on nuclear installations could have catastrophic consequences far beyond the region. Sierra Leone fully aligns with the call by the UN Secretary General for de-escalation, dialogue, and the exercise of maximum restraint. This is a time for diplomacy, not confrontation. We urge all parties to step back from the edge and to recommit to diplomatic channels as the only viable path towards durable peace and stability. Madam President, the Middle East has long been plagued by cycles of conflict and mistrust. But history has also shown that bold diplomacy, even in the most difficult moment, can yield hope. We therefore call for an immediate cessation of hostile actions and urge the revival of regional and international efforts aimed at de-escalation and mutual security assurances. In this regard, Sierra Leone reiterates its long-standing position that the only path to lasting peace in the region lies in good faith negotiation based on international law and the principles of the UN Charter. We reaffirm the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states in the region and underscore the need to avoid provocations and retaliatory measures that may trigger wider regional conflagration. We also express our support for the important work of the IAEA in monitoring nuclear programs and ensuring peaceful use of nuclear energy. The independence and impartiality of the agency must be respected by all member states. In this critical time, full cooperation with the IAEA is essential to prevent further erosion of trust and to safeguard against nuclear proliferation. The international community cannot afford to allow further escalation. The cost in human life, environmental degradation, economic disruption, and regional instability will be incalculable. This is a moment of truth for this Council to assert its collective responsibility in upholding peace and security. Therefore, we call on global leaders and states with influence to emphasize the need for non-military approaches at this time and to promote dialogue, particularly through the IAEA, as the international technical institution entrusted with overseeing the peaceful use of nuclear energy. We reaffirm the Security Council's responsibility to promote de-escalation and preserve international peace and security through peaceful and lawful means. we call on all members of the Council to work constructively towards a consensus response that reaffirms our shared commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, especially the peaceful resolution of dispute. In closing, Madam President, Sierra Leone urges all concerned parties to take a step back, to de-escalate, and to return to the table of dialogue. The world is watching, and history will judge the choices to be made in this defining moment. Finally, on the broader question of peace in the Middle East, Sierra Leone expresses its regret over the announcement of the postponement of the planned high-level conference on Palestine and the two-state solution as a result of the recent strikes. We hope that the conference will be reconvened at the earliest opportunity and as a crucial step towards advancing a just and lasting peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of China.
President, thank you for convening this emergency open meeting and for the briefings by Director General Grossi and Under Secretary General Di Carlo. Early this morning, Israel launched large-scale attacks on multiple targets in Iran, causing damage to Iran's nuclear facilities and casualties. The Israeli side said that the Israeli military operations would last for several days. China condemns Israel's actions that violate Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, opposes the intensification of tensions and expansion of conflicts, and is deeply concerned about the potential grave consequences of the Israeli operations. The abrupt heating up of the region serves no one's interests. We urge Israel to immediately cease all military adventurism, avoid further escalating tensions, and call on all relevant parties to abide by the UN Charter and international law, resolve disputes through political and diplomatic means, and jointly maintain regional peace and stability. China is seriously concerned about the negative impact of the current developments on the diplomatic negotiations on the Iranian nuclear issue. China has always been committed to peacefully resolving the Iranian nuclear issue through dialogue and negotiation. We oppose the use of force and illegal unilateral sanctions and oppose armed attacks on peaceful nuclear facilities. As an NPT signatory, Iran's right to the peaceful uses of nuclear energy should be fully respected. President, for some time now, conflicts in the Middle East have dragged on, and the regional situation has remained highly tense. Gaza has been subjected to prolonged attacks and blockades, with over 2 million people trapped in an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. The international community should work together to promote a ceasefire in Gaza, de-escalate the regional situation, and effectively curb the spread of the conflict. Countries with significant influence over Israel should practically play a constructive role. The Security Council should make full use of all the means conferred to it by the Charter to ensure the implementation of its relevant resolutions and to play its due role in maintaining regional peace and security. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me also thank Under Secretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for your briefings. Colleagues, we meet at a critical moment for regional and international peace and security. As we speak, the situation in the Middle East is once again at the top of our agenda. The risk of escalation and regional destabilization is deeply worrying and something that requires our greatest attention. It is now time for all actors to show utmost restraint, to prioritize the safety and well-being of their people, to choose dialogue over confrontation. Madam President, Denmark's position is clear. Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. For years, Iran has continued to undertake activities in blatant violation of the JCPOA. Its production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium had reached unprecedented levels, Its nuclear enrichment capability and its operations continue to expand. It is very disturbing that the IAEA is unable to provide assurances that the Iranian nuclear program is exclusively peaceful because Iran is not fulfilling its legally binding safeguards obligations. These activities constitute a threat to international peace and security and a threat to the global non-proliferation regime. Yesterday's IAEA resolution clearly demonstrated this dangerous course of action. Still, we strongly believe that diplomacy must prevail. We have supported the talks between Iran and the United States on the status of Iran's nuclear program. We strongly urge Iran to engage in this dialogue in good faith. Madam President, in this current climate, we stress the importance of avoiding serious consequences in terms of nuclear accidents, which would be nothing short of devastating. This is not true only for Iran, but far beyond its borders. We urge all parties to abide by their obligations under the UN Charter and international law, including avoiding any steps that could lead to a potential radioactive release. Let me also use this occasion to express our full support for the IAEA and its verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear program and its reporting. The involvement of the IAEA remains essential. Madam President, in closing, let me reiterate the urgency of de-escalation at this moment. For a region already grappling with too much crisis and conflict, a cycle of retaliation would only worsen the situation and risk plunging the Middle East further into conflict. This must be avoided. We call for a recommitment to diplomacy over discord, for the courage to reduce tensions, to step back from this dangerous brink. Denmark stands ready to support any and all efforts to this end, to find a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue through a negotiated political solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for the informative and timely briefings. Madam President, the situation in Iran and the Middle East is still unfolding. There is a danger moment, and any further military escalation in the Middle East and beyond should be avoided. We are particularly concerned at the escalation in the region while talks between Iran and the United States on Iran's nuclear program were underway. Allow me to make two brief points. First, we call on both sides to immediately de-escalate, show maximum restraint, and avoid retaliation. The international community must be immediately engaged to prevent a regional conflagration using all available diplomatic and dialogue channels. We are closely monitoring the situation and reiterate our strong commitment to regional security. Greece has repeatedly expressed its strong concern over the Iranian nuclear program and stressed that Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. In this context, we reaffirm Israel's right to protect itself and to assure its security. At the same time, we strongly believe that lasting security can only be achieved through diplomacy and in a negotiated deal. A diplomatic resolution of the crisis is now urgent for the sake of the region's stability and global security. We stand ready to support, both bilaterally and through international organizations, all diplomatic efforts and prioritize a return to talks on Iran's nuclear program held by the United States. Second, we reiterate the need to respect international law and international humanitarian law. It is essential to uphold the UN Charter as regards the use of force, as well as the integrity of the global non-proliferation regime. We recall the obligation of UN member states to act in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. It is also of the utmost importance to ensure that civilians do not find themselves in the crossfire, especially given the nuclear aspect of the evolving crisis. As our foreign minister has recently stated in this chamber, and I quote, "The protection of civilians is not optional. It is a legal obligation under international humanitarian law and a moral imperative we cannot afford to neglect." We call upon all parties to respect international humanitarian law in all circumstances, and we call upon all member states to use their influence to ensure all parties respect for it, unquote. Madam President, in closing, let me repeat in the strongest possible terms that now more than ever, a diplomatic resolution is the only option. It is our only hope for peace and security in the region and beyond. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President.
We would like to also join colleagues in thanking Director General Grossi and Undersecretary General Di Carlo for their briefings. Madam President, Pakistan strongly condemns unjustified and illegitimate aggression by Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Pakistan stands in resolute solidarity with the brotherly people of Iran. We offer our sympathies and condolences on the loss of life and damages due to these heinous attacks. The Israeli military strikes violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran and clearly contravene the UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. We unequivocally denounce these blatant provocations, which constitute a grave danger and a serious threat to the peace, security, and stability of the entire region and beyond, with serious implications. Iran has the right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Madam President, these attacks follow a dangerous pattern of Israeli irresponsible conduct marked by ongoing military operations in Gaza and repeated cross-border strikes in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, demonstrating a consistent and deliberate disregard for international norms. Israel's actions in the Middle East reflect a continuing pattern of unilateral militarism in flagrant violation of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter and represent acts of aggression as defined under General Assembly Resolution 3314 of 1974. Israel's serial breaches of sovereignty normalize impunity, erode the authority of the United Nations, and gravely undermine the international order. Such blatant aggression and contempt for international law has already had devastating consequences. In Gaza, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed as a result of Israeli military onslaught, and a humanitarian catastrophe has unfolded under an illegal blockade that has in fact been there for over 15 years. In Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon, Israeli airstrikes have repeatedly targeted sovereign territory, undermining regional stability and exacerbating tensions. The fact that these attacks against Iran have happened in the middle of a negotiations process aimed at finding a peaceful diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue makes it all the more morally repugnant and against international norms. These actions risk eroding the trust and sanctity of the negotiations process, so crucial for the peaceful settlement of these issues. Madam President, Pakistan reaffirms its support for the resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue through peaceful means, diplomatic engagement, and sustained dialogue. The JCPOA was an outcome of painstaking and arduous yet constructive negotiations. It charted a roadmap to comprehensively address the concerns of the parties involved by clearly defining their relevant obligations and responsibilities. The illegal use of force against Iran and the ensuing situation are likely to frustrate the ongoing diplomatic efforts and could destabilize a region that is already under very severe stress. The ongoing diplomatic context to reach a negotiated deal and other endeavors to promote regional peace and security must not be allowed to be appended. It is highly regrettable that these attacks have happened when the IAEA was continuing its verification activities in Iran. Such actions threaten the IAEA's technical work, which should be supported and not disrupted. Israel has violated international law, IAEA statute, and several IAEA resolutions by attacking the IAEA safeguarded facilities. In addition to serious violation of international law, these attacks risk setting a dangerous negative precedent and pose a grave threat to safety of populations in the region and around the globe. Pakistan, as an immediate neighbor of Iran, is therefore seriously concerned.
Security Council Resolution 487 strongly affirmed such attacks as a clear violation of the UN Charter, the norms of international conduct, and a serious threat to the entire IAEA safeguard regime. We call on all parties, Madam President, to fulfill their respective obligations and responsibilities and avoid escalation. Even in these testing times, diplomatic engagement and dialogue must be prioritized. Clearly, the international community is in favor of peace and stability in the region. In a few days, next week, the international community, the UN membership, was to come together to express its will to chart the path for the Palestinian state as part of the two-state solution that would usher in the long-awaited, just, and durable peace in the Middle East. Israel's reckless and irresponsible behavior cannot be allowed to jeopardize the efforts for peace, endanger the stability of the entire region, and risk wider escalation, thereby threatening global peace and security. The Security Council bears primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security and to stop this aggression immediately. It must hold the aggressor accountable for its actions. This council must deny Israel the free hand and the impunity with which it continues to operate in defiance of international law and international opinion. It is also our collective responsibility to reject any notions by anyone, anywhere, that seek to distort, misuse, and abuse the right of self-defense in violation of international law and the UN Charter. Finally, this council must collectively muster the courage to take positions and adopt decisions that are in full conformity with the Charter of the United Nations. In accordance with its responsibility, the Council should encourage, support, and prioritize dialogue and diplomacy to advance peaceful resolution of conflicts. That is the only viable path forward, as many around the table have also echoed in their comments. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I'd like to start by thanking USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. President, the Security Council meets today at a dangerous moment. We are deeply concerned by Israel's strikes on sites in Iran, as well as the Iranian military action we've already seen in response. There is a clear risk that this crisis escalates, with serious implications for peace and security across the region and beyond. This is in no one's interests. Colleagues, our first priority must be to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. We urge all parties to urgently step back, show restraint, and reduce tensions. The UK did not participate in this action. And let me say clearly and unequivocally that Russia's claim that British sovereign bases on the island of Cyprus were in any way involved is nonsense. It is deeply irresponsible at moments like this for Russia to be spreading disinformation. We firmly support any diplomatic efforts to return to stability. Today, we have spoken to Israel at the highest levels, and our Foreign Secretary has also spoken to Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. We have urged both sides to show restraint and de-escalate tensions. We continue to engage partners across the region to ensure we are collectively doing our utmost to push for a peaceful outcome. The UK in partnership with the E3, has always championed a diplomatic solution to address Iran's nuclear escalation, which has no credible civilian justification. We will not be deterred from this. As my Prime Minister said today, we have long held concerns about Iran's nuclear program, as documented by the IAEA. Israel also needs to protect its people and security. It is therefore in the interests of all actors to stop military confrontation and pursue a negotiated solution. President, this is time for a strong, united position from members of this Council. We must take urgent action to de-escalate and provide an opportunity for a return to diplomacy. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by thanking USG Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for their valuable contributions to today's discussion. Madam President, Slovenia is deeply concerned with the overnight and today's developments that threaten to destabilize an already very fragile state of affairs in the Middle East. We express our deepest concern with the Israeli strikes on Iran and Iran's response. We condemn any military escalation in the region. Madam President, Israeli attacks on nuclear installations in Iran come at a particularly volatile time. While talks between Iran and the United States on the status of Iran's nuclear program are on their way. As both my President and the Prime Minister have said, these negotiations have sparkled a glimmer of hope to reach a deal that would be of substantial importance not only for the region, but for the whole international community. Slovenia remains concerned with the size and unclear nature of Iran's nuclear program. We have zero tolerance for proliferation of nuclear weapons. Moreover, our concerns are deeper by the fact that the IAEA still cannot confirm the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. However, for us, strikes against civilian infrastructure, whether they happen in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, or anywhere else, are unacceptable. Time and time again, Slovenia has cautioned against military action on Iran's nuclear program. There is only one legitimate option, and Slovenia remains confident that there is only a political solution to the issue. With this in mind, Slovenia calls on Iran and the US to prioritize a peaceful solution and continue their talks in Muscat. Madam President, lasting and robust security is built upon diplomacy, not military action. I join the Secretary General's call on both sides to show maximum restraint. Watching footage from the ground, it is clear the time to de-escalate is now, immediately. A descent into deeper conflict must be avoided at all costs. The region, and indeed the world, cannot afford it. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for her briefing, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Rafael Grossi for your briefing. Yesterday, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran's regime has, since its founding, repeatedly called for the State of Israel's eradication, launched unprovoked, direct, and proxy attacks on Israeli civilians, and spread terror, instability, and untold human suffering throughout the region. As we speak, Iran is firing missiles at civilian areas across Israel, including in Tel Aviv. As President Trump has repeatedly said, this dangerous regime cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Israel advised us this action was necessary for its self-defense. Every sovereign nation has the right to defend itself, and Israel is no exception. The United States was informed of the strikes ahead of time, but was not militarily involved in these strikes. Our absolute foremost priority is the protection of US citizens, personnel, and forces in the region. As Secretary Rubio said, Iran should not target US interests or personnel. Let me be crystal clear. No government, proxy, or independent actor should target American citizens, American bases, or other American infrastructure in the region. The consequences for Iran would be dire. President Trump was elected with a sweeping mandate from the American people to advance peace and to avoid the grave mistakes of past administrations that led to forever wars. We seek a secure peace. As President Trump said, the violence should come to an end, and Iran should make a deal so that there is, quote, no more death, no more destruction, close quote. The United States will continue to seek a diplomatic resolution that ensures Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon or pose a threat to stability in the Middle East. Iran's leadership would be wise to negotiate at this time. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to thank the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Director General of the International Agency for Atomic Energy. We thank them for their briefings describing the situation. Madam President, following the strikes last night by Israel against Iran, France has been following the situation very closely, and we express our deep concern as regards the current developments. France recalls its commitment to the stability in the Middle East and urges all of the parties to exercise maximum restraint and to work towards de-escalation. The President of the Republic and the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs had talks this morning with their counterparts in the region and beyond, and they conveyed the same message on the need to put an end to the current escalation. The commitment of France towards diplomacy is unwavering alongside its E3 partners and in close coordination with the United States. Diplomacy must prevail now. We in France stand ready together with our partners to support efforts aimed at reducing tension, and we reaffirm, as was recalled by the President of the Republic, the right of Israel to protect itself and ensure its security. Madam President, France has many times expressed its concern regarding the escalation of the Iranian nuclear program. This escalation is a threat for the European security interests and for the peace and security internationally. Iran's nuclear weapon would threaten the stability of the region and would bring with it the risk of further escalation, proliferation. In April, under the presidency of Jean-Noel Barrot, France organized a Security Council meeting to highlight the shared interest of the international community to preserve the non-proliferation regime, which is a key element of our collective security. And this implies for Iran that it needs to uphold its commitments not to seek or acquire nuclear weapons, and they need to fulfill its obligations. France, together with its European E3 partners, has engaged constantly in looking for a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear crisis and will continue doing the same. We've contributed to the negotiations of the 2015 agreement and towards its implementation and its preservation to date. Iran did not take up the numerous opportunities to return to the agreement. Iran continued the escalation of its nuclear program in violation of its obligations and commitments. The Iranian nuclear program has never been as advanced as it is today, and it lacks any credible civilian justification. The IAEA Director General is not in a position today where he would state that it's exclusively peaceful. And this week, on the basis of a comprehensive report, which is a technical and impartial assessment by the agency, the Board of Governors of the IAEA found that Iran is in violation of its safeguards obligations. In the recent days, Iran announced the increase in its enrichment capacities and the creation of a new infrastructure for that. And it continues its ballistic missile activities, which destabilize the region and can reach not just the region, but also European territory. It transfers drones and missiles to Russia for its war of aggression against Ukraine. France, together with partners, supports a diplomatic, credible, and lasting solution so as to address the legitimate concerns of the international community regarding the Iranian nuclear program. The solution has to be arrived at before the expiration of the Security Council Resolution 2231 in October. We once again call upon Iran to return to upholding its obligations and to commit itself to negotiations so as to avoid escalation and continued destabilization of the region. Madam President, our priority is to prevent regional conflagration and to continue with a diplomatic solution. France stands ready to work with all of its partners to promote de-escalation in the region. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Guyana. I thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General of the IAEA, Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, for their important briefings. Colleagues, Guyana is deeply concerned about the attack carried out by Israel against facilities in Iran. My delegation has noted the reports that the attack has resulted in the loss of lives, including civilians. It has also reportedly resulted in retaliatory drone strikes by Iran against Israel. Israel's latest attack on Iran contravenes the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. At a particularly volatile period in the region, the attack risks exacerbating existing tensions in the Middle East and escalating the ongoing crisis. Guyana is concerned about the recent military escalation in the region and calls for maximum restraint from member states. In a region that is becoming increasingly combustible with each passing day, we appeal for dialogue, diplomacy, and good sense to prevail, and for all parties to commit to no further military escalation in the region. Colleagues, Guyana reiterates its appeal to both Israel and Iran to exercise maximum restraint and to avoid any further maneuvers that could plunge the entire Middle East into further turmoil, or worse, result in a nuclear catastrophe. The world simply cannot afford any miscalculations. The consequences for civilians could be catastrophic. Guyana, therefore, urges both Israel and Iran to fully comply with their obligations under international law and relevant resolutions adopted by this Council. We further call on the two parties to uphold the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, to adhere fully to international law and the United Nations Charter, and to settle their differences peacefully. Guyana also stresses the importance of accountability for all violations of international law and to avoid creating a culture of impunity for such actions. Finally, Guyana will act constructively to support any Security Council measure that is in keeping with its mandate aimed at preserving international peace and security. The Council must take a united approach to these developments to confront the prospects of outright war in a region and the devastating consequences that would follow for the region and beyond. The maintenance of international peace and security requires us all to take decisive action, and now is the moment to redouble our collective efforts to prevent a wider conflagration. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, Madam President, we extend our sincere congratulations to Guyana as assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, and we thank you for your coordination and for convening this urgent and important meeting. We appreciate Under Secretary General Mr. Carlo and Director General Mr. Grossi for their contribution to this meeting. We also wish to express our appreciation to Algeria, Pakistan, China, and the Russian Federation for their support in convening this emergency session to address Israel's unlawful act of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, a grave violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I address the Council today on behalf of the people and government of Islamic Republic of Iran with the utmost urgency and grave alarm. Madam President, last night, the Israeli regime, the most dangerous and terrorist regime in the world, with full intelligence and political support from the United States regime, conducted a series of coordinated and premeditated military attacks across multiple cities in Iran. These acts of aggression and unlawful strikes target peaceful nuclear facilities, military sites, vital civilian infrastructure, and residential areas. Among the key targets was the Natanz nuclear facility, a safeguarded site under the full monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Madam President, we strongly and unequivocally condemn the barbaric and criminal attack. A series of targeted assassinations were against senior military officials, nuclear scientists, and innocent civilians. So far, 78 people, including senior military officials, have been martyred and over 320 others injured. The overwhelming majority of them civilians, including women and children. Earlier today, Israel continued its act of aggression against Iran, once again targeting multiple civilian and military sites across several Iranian cities. These deliberate and systematic killings were not only illegal, but inhuman, a chilling display of calculated aggression. These atrocities constitute clear act of state terrorism and flagrant violation of international law. Madam President, the inaction of the United Nations, the Security Council, and the IAEA, despite repeated and documented warning by Islamic Republic of Iran regarding Israeli threats against its nuclear sites, have seriously undermined the credibility and authority. Their silence in the face of repeated Israeli provocation has emboldened this rogue regime to escalate its violation and cross every red line. Let us be clear. This reckless attack on safeguarded nuclear facilities defied not only the fundamental principles of international law, but also basic common conscience. Any damage to these facilities risks catastrophic radiological consequences that would not be confined to Iran, but could spread across the region and beyond. Only a regime devoid of humanity and responsibility would endanger millions of lives in pursuit of its destructive ambitions. These actions stand in direct violation of numerous legal instruments, including the IAEA Statute, the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the Geneva Convention, and multiple Security Council and IAEA General Conference resolutions, all of which prohibit attacks or threats against nuclear facilities under safeguards. Above all, this aggression is a grave breach of the United Nations Charter, particularly Article 2, Paragraph 4, which prohibit the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any member state. Israel also violated Iraq's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The permanent mission of Iraq today formally protested and condemned this violation of its territorial integrity in a letter to the Security Council and the Secretary General. Madam President, those who support this regime with the United States at the forefront must understand that they are complicit by aiding and enabling these crimes, by they share full responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and deliberate undermining of global peace and security. The Israeli regime's long-standing crimes against the oppressed Palestinian people, its repeated violation of the sovereignty of regional countries, and its possessions of undeclared weapons of mass destruction have made the Middle East a cauldron of chronic instability since its creation. It is long overdue for the international community to act. This regime must be disarmed of all weapon mass destructions, placed under international supervision, and held fully accountable. Madam President, this is not a regional issue. This is not merely an attack on one country. This is a direct assault on the international order, an attack on the Charter of the United Nations, the UN system, the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, as well as the authority of the IAEA. Israel's leadership, including its criminal prime minister, has shamelessly and publicly claimed responsibility for these heinous acts. Israeli officials say that this aggression aims to wreak nuclear talks. This confession alone is enough to reveal the real motive behind the attack: to kill diplomacy, to sabotage negotiation, and to drag the region into wider conflict. This leaves no room for denial. Furthermore, the aggression was intentional, coordinated, and fully backed by a permanent member of this council, the United States. The United States' complicity in this terrorist attack is beyond doubt. The officials of the United States have expressly and brazenly confessed their willful aid and assistance in the crimes and gross violation that Israeli regime committed as of last night, including the deliberate transfer of arms. We will not forget that our people lost their lives as a result of the Israeli attacks with American weapons. These actions amount to declaration of war. They are the latest in a long and well-documented pattern of lawless, destabilizing, and aggressive behavior by the Israeli regime, a regime that acts with impunity because it is shielded by powerful allies. This must end. Madam President, the Security Council must act now, firmly and decisively. In 1981, this very council responded unanimously to the Israeli military attack on Iraqi Osirak nuclear reactor by adopting Resolution 487, which unequivocally condemned the aggression as a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The Council also called on this criminal regime to refrain from any such acts or threats in the future. Had the Council enforced that resolution and held Israel accountable at that time, this regime would not have been emboldened to continue this unlawful behavior with impunity. The current aggression is a direct consequence of decades of inaction and double standards. Madam President, the Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its inherent right to self-defense as enshrined in Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran will respond decisively and proportionately to these acts of aggression at a time, in a place, and by means of its choosing. This is not a threat. This is the natural, legal, and necessary consequence of an unprovoked military attack. Iran's response will be firm, lawful, and essential to restore deterrence, defend our sovereignty, and uphold the principles of international law. No aggressor can be allowed to act with impunity. Madam President, we have requested this emergency meeting because we expect this Council to fulfill its charter mandate. The Security Council must condemn in the strongest possible term Israeli unlawful aggression. It must take immediate, concrete measures to hold the Israeli regime accountable and to prevent the further corrosion of international peace and security. Anything left would signal to collapse of the international system and invite chaos. Let me conclude with a simple and undeniable truth. Israel attacked Iran. Israel violated international law and the UN Charter, and Israel must be held accountable. The Security Council must act now and stop this act of aggression immediately. Silence is complicity in this crime. I thank you.
Thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Madam President, first, I would like to thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi. Madam President, Israel has acted to prevent its destruction, and the world now stands at a crossroad between denial and clarity. This is not only a defining moment for Israel, it is a defining moment for the global security order and for the credibility of the international system. As we speak, hundreds of ballistic missiles with conventional payloads are striking Israel's cities, neighborhoods, communities. They are striking population centers, not military bases, not Air Force bases, cities. Dozens are injured, 2 of them in a critical condition, and we are still following the news. Now take a moment and imagine if today that radical regime had nuclear warheads for those missiles. Last night, the State of Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a preemptive military operation carried out with precision, purpose, and the most advanced intelligence at our disposal. The mission was very clear: dismantle Iran's nuclear program, eliminate the architects of its terror and aggression, and neutralize the regime's ability to follow through on its repeated public promise to destroy the state of Israel. For years, Iran has declared its intent. Its leaders have spoken without hesitation. Less than a month ago, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei called a quote, cancerous tumor that must be eradicated. IRGC commanders have vowed to, quote, open the gates of hell on Israel. This is a picture from the main square in Tehran. The streets of Tehran display a countdown clock. At the time of the photo, you can see it in Arabic, it was at 8,411 days. It is tracking the regime's planned timeline for Israel's destruction, paid by the government, putting it in the main squares in Tehran. These threats have been made on a near daily basis. Never again will we dismiss such threats. For too long, the world convinced itself that these were just words, that genocidal slogans and threats to erase us could be ignored or rationalized. But Israel has never had that luxury. We know our enemies. We know their ideology. And when a regime builds ballistic missiles, enriches uranium to near weapons grade, and openly declares its intent to destroy us, we believe them. We take them at their word. And we take action before it is too late. Colleagues, Israel did not act recklessly. We waited. We waited while Iran enriched uranium to 60%, a level with no civilian justification, and a level that brings the regime within days of a nuclear breakout. We waited while the IAEA reported that Iran had obstructed inspectors, destroyed monitoring equipment, and accelerated its covert special development program. We waited while Iran developed trigger mechanisms, detonation systems, and plans for warheads. We waited while its leadership actively recruited more nuclear scientists. We waited while Iran constructed a ballistic missile industry so large and sophisticated, and we can expose it now, that it was intended to challenge even the US and Russia in ballistic missile capabilities. They cannot deny it. We waited for diplomacy to work. We gave the international community time. We watched negotiations stretched on as Iran made forced concessions or refused the most fundamental conditions. All the while, Iran continued to build toward the unthinkable. Last night, the wait ended. Our operation targeted 3 layers of the threat. First, we eliminated the central figures of Iran's military and nuclear command. This included Mohammad Hussein Bagheri, chief of the armed forces, Hussein Salami, commander of the IRGC terror organization, and Ghulam Ali Rashid, commander of emergency command. These men directed Iran's conventional military forces and terror forces. They coordinated the terror network that has plagued our region for decades. Think how many meetings you had here about the proxies of Iran in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. Second, we struck Iran's military infrastructure, specifically the surface-to-surface missile array. Israeli Air Force fighter jets, guided by precise intelligence, completed a series of strikes against the Iranian regime's missile capabilities. Dozens of launchers, missile storage facilities, and additional military sites were destroyed. Late last year, Iran launched wave after wave of ballistic missiles at our cities. They deliberately targeted civilians. The destruction of these missile systems is a moral imperative. These are weapons with the capacity to reach thousands of kilometers. Leaving them in the hands of a radical regime, one that openly dreamed of wiping our nation off the map, was not an option. We will not hesitate. We will not relent. And we will not allow a genocidal regime to endanger our people. Third, we struck the core of the nuclear program, the underground enrichment facilities at Natanz. This facility was operating at a military-grade capacity. Intelligence confirmed that within days, Iran could have produced enough material for multiple bombs. We targeted the heart of that effort. Madam President, this operation was carried out because the alternative was unthinkable. How long did the world expect us to wait? How long? Let's speak about it. until they assembled the bomb, until they mounted it on a Shahab missile, until it was en route to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, like the more than 100 missiles that they sent an hour ago? How long should we wait? And if anyone in this chamber still believes Iran would never use such a weapon, I invite you to remember October 7. On that day, we saw what Iran's proxy Hamas was capable of. And then in Gaza, they did it with Kalashnikovs, with grenades. They butchered families, they burned children alive, they mutilated women. Imagine what the head of the snake would do with a nuclear warhead. To that end, we uncovered intelligence revealing a multi-front plan directed by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas for a future assault on Israel. This one would be far more sophisticated than October 7. It envisioned mass missile launches, first from Iran, then from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, followed by coordinated infiltrations of our borders. The plan was not aspirational, it was operational, and it was nearing execution. This council has convened countless times in recent months. You have passed resolutions, called for restraint, demanded ceasefire. You met in emergency sessions when Hamas was under threat. But when Iran marched toward nuclear capability, you said nothing. When they crossed line after line, you drew none of your own. So we acted. We acted to ensure our people alive. We acted so that Jewish children in Jerusalem will not wake up to the sound of air raid sirens triggered by a nuclear launch. We acted so that Iranian missiles will not carry radioactive payloads into civilian neighborhoods. We acted because history has taught us that silence is complicity and hesitation is fatal. We acted because 80 years ago, the Jewish people made a promise to ourselves, never again. That promise applies to a nuclear holocaust as well. This was an act of national preservation. It was one we undertook alone, not because we wanted to, but because we were left no other option. We now turn to this council, not for permission, but for recognition. Recognition that Israel did what the world should have done. Recognition that the Iranian regime violated every obligation they ever undertook. Recognition that Israel had the undeniable right and duty to defend its people from extermination. We urge the Council to condemn Iran's nuclear violations. We urge the Council to finally acknowledge the existential threat Iran poses to the world. We urge the Council to join us in our commitment to prevent their genocidal dreams from becoming a reality. But we also expect something even more basic: moral clarity. Stop equating aggressors with defenders. Stop treating a genocidal regime and a democracy under siege as two sides of the same coin. The Iranian regime was preparing for war. This war would have stretched across the Middle East, to Europe, to Asia, to the Americas. It would have been against the international order. We acted to prevent a threat that would endanger not only Israel, but the entire world. We will not sit quietly while our people are targeted. Not again, not ever. Empty words will not stop Iran. Israel will. We did not wait for the bomb to fall, and we will never allow that day to come. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Iraq.
Shukran.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for responding to our request and convening this session. I'd like to thank the USG and the Director General of the IEA for their briefings. Madam President, Iraq expresses its deep concern and condemnation of the dangerous military aggression committed by the Israeli entity against the territories of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including their blatant violation of Iraq's sovereignty and the inviolability of its airspace. This constitutes a flagrant breach of the provisions of international law and the UN Charter. In this regard, the Republic of Iraq has submitted a formal letter of complaint to Your Excellency, President of the Security Council. We clarified the details of the said violations, which is not only an infringement on the inviolability and sovereignty of Iraq, but is also an illegitimate use and transgression on the airspace of another sovereign state to initiate acts of aggression against another UN member state. This exposes the entire region to huge security risks. This unacceptable and illegal aerial breach jeopardizes Iraq's security and stability. It's also a dangerous violation of our territorial integrity and our airspace. It pushes us into conflicts that we are not party to and are far from. It threatens regional and international peace and security. Iraq categorically rejects any attempt at turning our territories or airspace into a theater to settle regional or international accounts. We stress that we will not permit our national security or sovereignty to be at risk. We will not allow such violations to be repeated under any pretexts. Madam President, the government of the Republic of Iraq underlines that this aggression is also a violation of relevant Security Council resolutions and a violation of the sovereignty of a UN member state. This necessitates a clear position from the international community to ensure serious accountability. The Israeli entity is fully responsible for this escalation and for the repercussions of this violation of the security of Iraq and that of the entire region. Accordingly, the government of Iraq calls on the Council to first condemn this flagrant violation of Iraqi sovereignty and considering it a clear breach of the principles of the UN Charter and the rules of international law. Second, hold the Israeli entity fully responsible legally and politically for these acts of aggression. Third, take the necessary measures to stop these violations and prevent their repetition as they put Iraq's security and stability at risk. Madam President, this aggression highlights once again the need for the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility and maintain international peace and security. It must take a clear position vis-à-vis such repeated violations by the Israeli entity, whether against the Palestinian people or against a neighboring country in the region, all with impunity in a way that threatens the credibility of the international law at large. It will only exacerbate tension and instability in the region, which might lead to grave consequences. In conclusion, Madam President, the Republic of Iraq reiterates that it is fully committed to the principles of good neighborliness, non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries, and respect of international law. We reserve our right to take any necessary measures to protect our national security and sovereignty in line with the Charter and the rules of international law. Iraq calls on this august council to guarantee respect of state sovereignty and independence pursuant to the principles and purposes of the United Nations. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Iraq for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
In the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful, thank you, Madam President. Distinguished members of the Council, at the outset, allow me to thank Madam De Carlo and Mr. Grossi for their two valuable briefings. We address you today on behalf of the member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council, namely the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Sultanate of Oman, and my country, the State of Kuwait. The GCC condemns the attacks by Israel since early this morning against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its attacks against Iranian territory. We express our concern towards this serious escalation that warns of serious and dire consequences for the regional security and stability. These acts of aggression that come at a delicate moment when the Middle East is witnessing increased level of tensions are a blatant violation against the sovereignty of a UN member state, and they represent a serious precedent that undermines the basis upon which the international law is built, and in particular the principle of the respect for state sovereignty and the non-use or threat of use of force against any state. Madam President, the timing of this attack is very sensitive when international efforts were intensifying to resume nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States. This attack will likely derail the diplomatic efforts and risks a wider conflict that will seriously affect regional and international security. In this context, the GCC affirms that such attacks, regardless of the justification, will only lead to deeper polarization and an expanded conflict, and they pave the way for a regional trajectory that is dangerous and that will not serve the interests of any population in the region. We also emphasize that security in the region cannot be achieved through escalation and bombardment, but through dialogue and political and diplomatic means, and through promotion of good neighborliness and mutual respect. The GCC group will continue the efforts aimed at de-escalation and to advance dialogue and diplomacy. We reiterate our commitment to working with the concerned parties for the sake of peaceful and lasting resolutions that guarantee peace and security in the region. We also call in this context for the greatest degree of restraint and wisdom and to avoid an expanded conflict. The international community, and in particular the UN Security Council, must uphold their responsibility in ending these violations. In conclusion, the GCC reiterates its firm commitment to support peace and security and stability in the region, and we categorically reject the violation of any state sovereignty under any pretext, and we warn against an expanded conflict that will only serve the forces of chaos and extremism. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank the representative of Kuwait for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.